press briefing on immigration enforcement and its impact on New Jersey families. Thank you for joining us. My name is Cassandra Etienne, Associate Director at the Center for Cooperative Media. Today's panel is part of our press briefing series produced by the Center in partnership with ethnic and community media partners. These events help to facilitate reporter and newsroom access to newsmakers and government officials who can talk about timely issues of importance to New Jerseyans. We begin this conversation about the harmful impact of immigration policies within days of protests at Delaney Hall, where hundreds of detainees and supporters went on a labor and hunger strike over the Memorial Day weekend. The protests and outrage are in response to the inhumane conditions at Delaney Hall, which is a privately owned facility in Newark. Protesters were confronted by masked ICE agents, including some of whom used gas canisters and batons, according to eyewitness videos. New Jersey Senator Andy Kim, who'd been visiting the site, was also among those pepper sprayed, and the Department of Homeland Security has denied elected officials' claims of unacceptable conditions at Delaney Hall, while also denying access to Governor Mikey Sherrill and other Democrats who were trying to see conditions at Delaney Hall for themselves. When we think of families like that of detainee Martin Alonso Soto Hernandez, whose story is at the center of the Delaney Hall protests, we see that this case is, or this development is hardly isolated. As of April 2026, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services has issued internal guidance instructing officers to resubmit pending immigration applications for enhanced FBI background checks. And the panelists will talk more about this, but the change could affect millions of immigrants and their families with pending applications that require fingerprints, including asylum, green card, and citizenship applications. In just a moment, we'll welcome today's panel led by host and moderator Ana Paola Pazmino, Executive Director of Resistencia en Acción and the independent media outlet Radio Jornalera NJ. But first, a few reminders. Today's event is being recorded and we'll have time at the end, typically in the last 20 minutes or so of the panel, for questions from the audience. So as the questions come up, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and towards the end, raise your hand and you can ask them directly of the panelists. We'll do our very best to answer all your questions during our time together. Thank you again for joining us, and I will turn it over now to Ana.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to come on and listen to such a great time to have this panel. It's called Immigration Enforcement and Its Impact on New Jersey Families. I'm Ana Paola, like I was introduced. I'd like to take a moment to just tell you a little bit about myself. My name, my country of birth is Ecuador. I am very proud to be an immigrant. Came when I was very young. My parents were factory workers, and most of my family has now migrated, but we also see that there's a need for education on the immigrant community, and that is why press is so important, and briefings on local news that is telling the truth. And so my passion has been to lift the voices of immigrants through education. I'm an educator. I taught Spanish in the public school system for many years. And now as an organizer and director, I am helping to make sure that the families of New Jersey, those that are affected by these anti-immigrant laws and anti-immigrant policies that are being put forth in our government by this government, need to be stopped, right? And so we are here to tell the truth today, and we are here to collaborate amongst very, very, very important and collaborators of the community, as is Oscar Chacon, Itzel Hernandez, and Guerline Pierre. And they'll be talking a little bit about themselves and about their work, but I would like to also mention that we are I am here at Delaney. I just took a little quiet spot to take this panel. And I want to show you a video of what Radio Jornalera and the other community radios are doing, like Radio Cosecha and El Pueblo Unido, and various outlets that we have that are giving specific and very truthful information. So we're gonna share. Thank you, Ani, for this. He's gonna play the video so you can see the latest, okay?
Como ven, tenemos los agentes detrás de nosotros que han sido nada, pero rudos, que siguen tirando sus gas, están tirando la pimienta, están haciendo todo para mover a la gente. Han habido muchos que se han lastimado, muchos que están sufriendo aquí afuera, pero seguimos aquí afuera para la comunidad.
And you see, so I hope that you were able to see the news reporter is a organizer or a community member. Street reporters are super important to us in this moment and part of the community. And two, I'm sure you were able to see there's a lot of people on the ground, maybe with an organization, maybe not, maybe upset at this fascist government and all of that is happening here in New Jersey. And then you also have seen the strikers flickering the lights on and off because inside the detainees are fed up with what is happening here and nobody has been listening to them. And now the families are talking and telling the truth, saying their testimonies, telling their demands. And that's why it is so important that we still keep uplifting what we're seeing and why these immigration policies are against us and not for us. So I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists so that we can start up a discussion of how is this impacting our communities and how are we able to collaborate, okay? Because we can't go without an action plan and we can't go without thinking about what are further steps. First, I'd like to introduce Oscar. Oscar is an immigrant from El Salvador with more than 40 years of experience in immigrant rights, immigration policy advocacy work. He's the co-founder and former executive director of Alianza Americas, a network of immigrant-led organizations in the U.S. He is based in the Chicago area. Welcome, Oscar.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. We also have our next panelist, Guerline Pierre was born in Jersey City, New Jersey, to a Haitian immigrant family. She was called into public service with a deep commitment to uplift broken, marginalized, and often unheard communities, both in New Jersey and globally. She holds a bachelor degree of arts in public administration from Broomfield College and a master's of public health from Montclair State University. She is currently continuing to work with her family and her two children to transform lives through cultural grounding. Thank you so much for being with us. And I would love to introduce to you my very good colleague, Itzel Hernandez, with American Friends Service Committee, one of the best organizers that I know here in New Jersey, who is often on the ground and then as well as always involved in some policy that will be able to benefit the immigrant community. Thank you so much, Itzel, for being with us.
Yeah, no, thank you. So grateful to be here as well.
So I think we could briefly open the discussion to tell us, what are you working on? What is it that you want the community to know right now and everybody who's watching us? We'll start with you, Oscar.
Thank you. Well, let me actually try to offer a little bit of context, for our conversation, because I think it is important for folks to understand that since its inauguration in January of last year, The Trump administration has carried out the most systematic, multifaceted, and relentless attack against immigrant communities across the entire nation. To justify this attack, the Trump administration embraced a false story linking immigration with an alleged increase in criminal behavior in US society. This is simply a lie that has been repeated a million times since the mid 1970s. So it didn't begin yesterday or with Trump. It's been with us for many decades. During most of 2025, the anti-immigrant attack took the form primarily of a quasi-military invasion of cities such as Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Charlotte, and ultimately Minneapolis and St. Paul in Minnesota. This strategy of occupations didn't work. Instead of communities supporting the Trump administration, the rejection was overwhelming. Sadly, it took the life of several US citizens killed by ICE or the Border Patrol, and the pattern of attacks and abuses against hundreds of other individuals at the hands of the same law enforcement entities, including immigrants, for the Trump administration to reassess its most visible anti-immigrant strategy. Since about March of this year, the attack against immigrants has been intensified. About 60,000 people are kept every night in detention facilities, such as Delaney Hall. And this, of course, generates juicy profits for several private corporations that make money by basically inflicting human pain. It is important also to know that pathways to secure immigrant visas, popularly known as green cards, are being increasingly blocked in multiple ways. Immigration hearings, which in the past, were individual opportunities for people to make a case to try to be able to find a way to stay in the US, are becoming increasingly collective shows of denials of merit, which basically turn the applicants into deportable individuals. I think it is also important to highlight the fact that more immigrant children are being separated from their parents under this second Trump administration. More immigrants in detention are dying. More than 50 have died just since January of last year, including 10 people who have committed suicide, 7 of them in 2026. And the list goes on and on. In the end, this anti-immigrant attack is largely motivated by a profound hate against people who are not of white skin, who are not of European ancestry, and for whom English is not their first language. In the past few months, there has been a rising demand to stop funding immigration enforcement altogether, including demands to abolish ICE. These are important demands. However, let me argue that we all must actually reject the decades-old narrative that consistently dehumanizes and demonizes immigrant communities, calling us illegals. We don't even call murderers illegals in our country, but we do against people who are undesirable foreign nationals, according to people in the White House. I think it is also important for us to also call for the abolishment of the 1996 immigration law, which provides the legal backing for all the abuses committed against immigrants, including the all-out assault being carried out nowadays by this second Trump administration. In the end, we will succeed in overcoming all of this if we are able to counter the hate campaign with a love campaign, if we are able to counter the fear campaign with getting to know each other campaign, and ultimately getting ourselves organized, not only to put in place a better immigration policy, but to work together to make our country as best as it can be for everyone, especially those of us who historically are left out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oscar. Oh, yes. And such good things were mentioned. And we will get back into it with the questions and discussions, but to be 100% as a panel, and to all of our viewers who are with us here, it is a time where your skin color really matters, right? And that's very sad. It has taken away our humanity. All right, so we will give our space now to Guerline Pierre.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Oscar, for that context. I thought that was very important. It was very detailed and very knowledgeable as well. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing that video earlier about Delaney Hall, because this is right front and center. You know, I live in the state of New Jersey, in South Jersey, and, you know, I'm from Jersey City. I grew up in Newark. And this kind of hit home because a dear friend of mine, she is a nurse, and she works for the organization called Be the Change. And she was out there on Monday. And I'm sad and heartbroken to report that she had to share a post that she witnessed a young woman shirt being ripped by ICE, and she was shoved to the floor. My colleague, nurse Norma Bowe, had her stethoscope on. She came to, provide medical support to anyone needing it. I saw that and pushed her to the ground, dragged her to the point where she had to now go to the ER. Thanks to God, she's okay. But the trauma that she's going to have to live with just because she was helping another person is horrifying. Okay. So I thank you for sharing that video. We need to have more conversations. And I wanted to share too, we need to have these conversations. I know a lot of times when we're in social media, there's a lot of opposition. Obviously, there's people, Trump supporter, or whoever they call themselves, MAGA, I don't know. But they're making a lot of comments, in what's happening. And I was so appalled that I saw so many comments saying, bring the water cannons out. Bring the water cannon in America today in 2026. If you go back to the civil rights movement back in the 60s, Martin Luther King walked Selma Bridge so that they can have the right to vote for their civil rights. And what did they do? They brought the dogs out and they brought the water cannons out, hosing peaceful protesters. So now I saw over a dozen folks making these comments under Norma's post, who's the nurse who's assisting the young lady who was assaulted and violated. So this is very concerning that we're going backwards. We're entering a new Jim Crow. History shows, it's just repeating itself. So we know what to expect, but we have to speak up and we have to be vocal. We can't hide behind our doors. If you can't be at, can't protest, can't physically be there, we got to be in the comments and we got to educate these folks that we have a constitution here. We have rights to protest peacefully. You don't have the right to remove that from us, So I just wanted to speak about that a little bit. But yes, my name is Guerline Pierre. I have a nonprofit called LAMP. The birth of LAMP started about 12 years ago. I started working in South Jersey with migrant farm workers. And I did that for about, I would say about 6 years, where I would recruit migrant children to be part of summer camp. I would go to the various farm camps in South Jersey. South Jersey is known for the blueberry. It's the blueberry capital of the world, supposedly, but I don't know. So down in South Jersey, in the Hamilton area, we have several migrant farm camps. So my job was to go to all these various farm camps and recruit the children, the migrant children, to be a part of a safe space, so that, you know, they had food and enjoyment for the summer. And also we covered healthcare services as well for the children. But what inspired me to move forward with LAMP was because the children were getting all the care, healthcare, food. But I'm like, what about the parents who's out in the field breaking their backs, from 5 a.m. till, sometimes late night, 11 at night. Sometimes I'm at the farm camps late night and they're still working, so for not for pennies, So, and I noticed that there was this, while I was outreaching, I noticed that there was a great need of resources, food, sometimes medical attention, maybe assistance with prescription. And these were farm workers coming from all over, from Mexico, Haiti, Puerto Rico. And, since then, LAMP started doing, summer outreach between June and August, which is the blueberry season, and just bringing out other organizations to these farm camps and providing medical care and resources, baby supplies, food, whatever was needed, and it's been hard the last few years, and it's been very terrifying because, a lot of times these farm owners are, I don't know, they're MAGA themselves, and they don't provide the best treatment to the farm workers. And then you do have some farm owners who are very supportive, and provide adequate resources and such, so you get both things in both spectrums. So sometimes going out to these farm camps could be a little bit terrifying, but that's what I've been doing for years. And the last 4 years, I had the opportunity to work for a refugee resettlement agency called Interfaith Rise. They're based out of New Brunswick, Highland Park area, actually. And my office was based out of the Violin area. So I was a program manager out of the Violin office for 4 years. And there I provided services to refugees, newcomers, new immigrants who are in this country needing housing, support, resources. And these refugees were eligible for benefits. So we assisted with applying for benefits and such. We refer them to legal services. So these are folks that I work primarily, would say the bulk of the population I served was the Haitian population and also the Cuban population. They are under the status of Cuban Haitian entrants. That was their status. So as a Cuban Haitian entrant, they're eligible for 5 years to apply for public benefits such as Medicaid, food stamps, get medical care, child care services and such. So that was my main role. And then, last year, like Oscar mentioned, it was a shift for me working at the Refugee Resettlement Agency. The beginning of January last year everything just happened so fast. Immediately, we were expecting new arrivals countries, and immediately USCIS, and they wanted to rejoin or reconnect with the families that they were already here, and that could not happen anymore. Immediately, the Violent office, we were a staff of 30. Immediately, because of the cuts that happened because of the Trump administration, we were down to 8. January, they started making cuts. February, we were probably the end of February, we were down to 8 staff to service hundreds and hundreds of newcomers and immigrants. Okay. So, and then my job was not secure at all. It was like week to week, day to day. Our job was on the line, So it was really, really tough. And not only that, it was tough about our job security, it was more about, it's not about me, but it was about the clients that I served. You know, a lot of them, they depended on our services to access different resources. They were scared to sometimes even come into our office. They didn't know where ICE would show up. They were terrified about even providing their information to us, because our information goes into a data hub, you know, and where is that information going? So we noticed a nice decline of clients coming in and requesting services because there was, you know, for their sake and protection, you know, they didn't feel comfortable sharing their personal information, you know, and I totally agreed with them, you know. So it just really became hard with, you know, the pressure of these extreme cuts, the changes of policy. The next thing that happened in 2025 that really took a big, huge, it caused a lot of like frantic in the newcomers, refugees population, is when the Trump administration, January of 2025, decided to change the work authorization. Folks who had work authorization, they arrived here, they were eligible for work authorization, was immediately revoked, just like that. These were folks who came to the country legally, okay? They arrived here legally with documents. You know, they had a plane ticket and came here and arrived legally, you know, and now their work authorization was revoked just like that. People who were working at their place of employment for a year or two at Walmart, Amazon, you know, was making a good living for themselves, was able to secure housing, was able to do a number of different things for themselves. And immediately that was just pulled underneath the rug from them, you know, so now it was just like staff, it was constant pivot. When all these policies were changing, we were pivoting. Okay, now we got to make sure, you know, they have to apply for asylum because that was like at the time the only option, you know. So we transitioned and assisted a number of clients, connecting them to legal services, and you know, they applied for asylum. A lot of them through that. While their asylum case is being pending, they have their work authorization. So a lot of them are able to work right now, but we don't know for how long. So everything is up in the air and is very gray, you know, and the uncertainty is terrifying, you know. So as of last year, October 2025, I no longer work for that nonprofit refugee resettlement agency, and I decided to focus on my nonprofit organization LAMP a little bit more because I saw the need was just so great. A lot of you know, I feel like the years I was working for that refugee resettlement agency was wonderful and I learned a lot, but it was a lot of case management. And I feel like this is a time for advocacy, you know, and that's what I'm doing right now. I'm currently still advocating for a lot of immigrant population in the South Jersey area, connecting them to resources. Sometimes they just need, I speak Haitian Creole, so sometimes they get documents, they don't understand what it says. I'm translating for them. You know, sometimes I'm at the doctor's office with them translating, you know, and then not only just translating, but also educating the providers, you know, that it's important that, you know, they have rights, they have human rights, and you're supposed to have an interpreter for them, you know. So it's a lot of educating, a lot of informing, a lot of advocating, and a lot of connecting. You know, my last piece that I will say is the most powerful thing we can do right now, because we don't know what's going to happen with this government. You know, they're cutting SNAP, they're cutting Medicaid, they're cutting all these benefits that help people thrive every day. But you know, we're right now, my thinking is to connect people to people. You know, that's the only way we will survive this. You know, we have to be there for our neighbors. We may have to be the one, if their SNAP food stamps get cut, we may have to be one to deliver food to our neighbors that need it. You know, it's getting to that point. So I like to connect immigrants to immigrants, refugees to refugees, whatever. We're connecting people to people so that we can grow, so you don't feel too isolated, because that isolation has caused a high level, like Oscar mentioned, the level of suicide that's happening right now, the depression. I'm dealing with this every day. Domestic violence has risen in the community I've seen. Mental health crisis has risen in the community, and they don't come out because they're hiding. They're afraid to come out, So what we do together, let's do it together. Bring our resources and make this really loud, because we are in the front line and we got to save these folks.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That is great to hear from a Haitian woman who is on the ground with families. I also want to mention that if you did your registration through the Eventbrite, we had a nice overview there of what Guerline was talking about, the TPS, right? The temporary protection status for many Haitians, Cubans, Venezuelans, right? I just want you to know, from that population of people, 1.3 million people from 17 countries are affected by that. And so we can't just be silent. And I see questions. Thank you to the people who are putting questions in and introducing themselves. This is a time for networking as well. So feel free to, take different emails from each other. And what we could do for each other is also share information, because the more times we put it on social media, the more times we put it on our whichever press we're on, is the best way to get the information out there. So because of time, I'm going to move on. We're going to go on to Itzel. Itzel is with American Friends Service Committee. Please talk to us a little bit about your work.
Sure, and thank you, folks, and thank you, everybody, for adding to such an enriching conversation. My name is Itzel Hernandez. I'm the immigrant rights organizer with the American Friends Service Committee, who over the past 30 years, specifically in the state of New Jersey, has focused on organizing communities in a nonpartisan fashion, working for peace with justice for all. And we do so in the state, just so folks understand the perspectives that we get to see, by providing comprehensive legal services. So we have attorneys that are going into detention, talking to detainees, a group of social workers that are also part of our team that ensure that people have transition plans once they get out, as well as simply support, right, the families that are left behind on the other side, having to deal with the detention or deportation, other folks that we accompany alongside many of our partners. And then grassroots organizing, we have a youth organizer that does a lot of work on the ground in this moment, because at the forefront of this, in the front lines, in the trenches, are young people, which is something that has been highlighted here. But I really just cannot overstate the role that they're playing in leading, in reporting from the street, in putting their bodies and their youth and their talents on the line to ensure that their families are kept together. And I think as we reflect in all this, for many of my first couple of years at the AFSC here in New Jersey, I focus on helping young people get into higher education, because we here firmly believe, as many folks on the call may, that education is a human right and not a privilege. And so with that being said, much of my work was seeing young people be harmed by an immigration system that is legally made to be cruel and dehumanizing and to stripe away people's convictions. But if there's anything to just kind of bring it full circle to what is happening over in Delaney Hall, is that we know what happens when you push people to the brink, and we know what happens when you make people feel like they're not being heard and are not being tended to, right? And for, the people in power, the powers that be, those that do not believe in the indomitable human spirit, they may think that if you push people and you break their bodies and you break their minds, you'll also break their spirit. But that's the thing about resistance, that we all inherently have, and that we all inherently deserve dignity and respect, right? One of the reasons why I'm with the AFSC is because I firmly do believe in the fact that we all have inherent human dignity and worth, whether it's because of a higher belief or no belief. If we are true to that, if we agree to that contract, then we must uphold each other's dignity and respect. And so just to circle back, because I know there's so much on the news going on about what the actual demands for the hunger strikes are in Delaney. I know that Ana, you could provide a lot of on the ground thing, but just a big picture overview for context. One, the detainees still want to, and the strikers still want to meet with Governor Mike Sherrill And that's because one thing is to explain to someone what you're seeing and experiencing. Another thing is for somebody to actually see it. And I think at this day and time where 110% increases in enforcement have happened in New Jersey, where there's a 400% increase in detention cells, right? We are now sitting close to I think there's almost just 2,000 cells, and that's not counting the possibility of Roxbury that it's still on the horizon, right? So what we are facing is a detention crisis in the state of New Jersey. We are seeing how unsustainable it is for us to continue caging our neighbors and loved ones in head of households that are oftentimes the economic engine of their families. What people are describing in this press conference, what we are trying to get across is that we cannot put people in detention as a policy solution. All this can be stopped if, to the comment that I saw in the chat about what can folks in power do? Well, for someone like Senator Kim, get back on the horse and finally put forth an immigration law that will allow people to be able to adjust their status. All this that we are witnessing is because people don't have an application that they can go in, fill out, and do the process like many others did before us. We know that it's been 30 years since immigration reform has happened, and that's what got us here. If you're wondering how do we get to these numbers, how do we get to a larger people that are undocumented now, after we spent billions in enforcement, it's because we are literally trying to cover the eyes of people and not let them see that at the same time that we are trying to enforce, we are carrying out the largest illegalization efforts in American history. To Anna's point, if TPS loses in the Supreme Court, if birthright citizenship doesn't come out right, if DACA does not come through, we are looking at hundreds of thousands of people that have been part of our society, that do different work and roles for us in our society, fully being pulled out, and it's not sustainable. And so it's not the same thing to talk about it as for somebody to witness it. And I think it's important for the governor to get a chance to witness the conditions that her constituents, both when she was a congresswoman and now as our governor, are undergoing. The second is, of course, and I think deeply telling for people who want to further dehumanize. You can't dehumanize a human, folks. And here's the proof of it. Folks in detention currently undergoing many recorded types of abuse are still asking for medically vulnerable people, young and the elderly, to be released and freed. Even in detention, people find ways to create solidarity. People find ways to still say, how do we help those that are more vulnerable? And last but not least, we just got over Memorial Day. I think this is the most telling and true thing. What they're asking for are three things that all of us who live in this country, I think, hold dear to our hearts, and that's what we fight every day to protect it. Freedom, due process, and dignity. We owe people their freedom, while these processes that are in shams, literally at this point, it's almost comical, the court system under the DOJ happening in the immigration. And that's not just me saying it, that's judges that used to sit on that bench saying this is a sham and a paper tiger and a lie on due process. Due process because of the most American concept that we can come up with, right? This is one of those things that we can either choose to continue to say or we can invest in. And we can invest it by upping the funding that is available to the DDDI fund, which is what allows some of our low-income neighbors to have access to attorneys. And we at the AFSC, alongside our partners in the law school, Seton Hall, Rutgers, and LSNJ, do our best to ensure that in New Jersey, due process means something, and it's not just a campaign slogan. And of course, dignity, because that is the least that we owe each other. These are for-profit entities that our government is using taxpayer dollars from to invest and cage our neighbors. And last but not least, just to wrap it all up, as we talked about and heard from folks on the panel, talked about the way in which there's a systematic illegalization. There's also an intentional propaganda machine to the tune of $200 million that was approved many months ago to dehumanize and hate our neighbors. And so, to the point that was shared earlier by my colleague, Guerline, really the most radical thing we can do today is go outside, say hi to a neighbor, ask how someone's doing, be ready and willing to cook one more plate of food, because when our safety nets fail, when our leaders fail, I think you get to actually see the best of this country. Because what we know is that after 250 years of imperfect history, but high ideals, what we have been able to pull in this place is people that are committed to things bigger than themselves, that are committed to ideas that are maybe far-fetched, but not impossible, and definitely worth pursuing. And so today, as we sit here, I thank you all for taking the time to really try to sit and proportionalize the problem, to rationalize the irrational, and above all things, to look for solutions. The one thing that I'll say is that while you see the last thing to close off, while we see here what communities are doing every day to protect each other, you can also see how detached the people in DC are while they're even arguing, regardless of the side of the fence that you sit on, whether they should or shouldn't increase even more billions would it be worth them funding into these machines that are only killing our neighbors at higher rates than ever before. And so as you see providers, as you see your neighbor lose access to SNAP food, don't think that money just magically stopped being there. They move the money, folks. The money is there, and people like Andy Kim and others should ask for that money to be clawed back so it can be sent to the right buckets of funding that needs to be presented. And people like the governor need to continue to find ways in which we can stop the creation of Roxbury, get vulnerable people out of Delaney Hall, and get a chance to meet with the people that are currently striking. The last thing is let's uplift the labor, folks. What we all have in common is our labor. And saying we are not going to give free labor to an incredibly record-breaking profiting company really is the best way to stand up against power in a day like this. So thanks all. Thank you, Ana.
Thank you, Itzel. Thank you also for providing context of what the demands are today at Delaney Hall. And I wanted to pinpoint a couple of things just before we go into questions. And please post your questions on there. I'm going to give you a space. But I did want to say that this hunger strike is not the only one happening in the United States. In California, in Adelanto, California, it's happening as well. What is the difference is that now we have New Jersey is fed up, right? New Jersey knows what they want and they do not want to see a detention center. And so as we collectively do whatever you think you can do with mutual aid, with on the ground work, with sharing press and testimonies, which is so important right now. And for the Spanish and the other languages press, I think it's super important to have our people on the ground, like we were speaking and saw the street reporters. Many of our people will be more trusting of other people telling them what's happening rather than a reporter, right? Just talking about the news. And I don't only refer to like ABC, Telemundo, and Univision is they're also culprits of siding sometimes with the corporations. We have also done good work of asking them, okay, you want our story, but why are you running ICE ads, right? Why are you allowing broadcasting corporation to come in and put those ICE ads when it's immigrants that are watching you? So what we can do together is so much. And you're right. Somebody is talking about love. Love is the contrary of what we need to give, but you cannot demand it. And love comes when you are connecting with others. And this is why we must connect. So I'm going to open up to the questions at this point. We had a really great question in the beginning about how can we Miss Darla Pick, you had a couple of things that you wanted to say. Would you like to open your mic and say something? Oh, Daria Pick, sorry. I read Darla. From Points News.
Anna, if she's not available, we can move to the next one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Let's also speak to let's see who else is. Oh, there was a bunch of conversations. Sorry that I missed through. Also, our panelists have put their information in the chat, so please make sure you take that and use it. From New York, Mr. Zahir, what protections exist for immigrants whose applications remain stuck in prolonged background checks for months or years? Would anybody like to comment?
Thank you.
I can give it a go.
Go ahead.
Not many. That's the unfortunate thing, right? It's really like a catch-22. You're waiting on these court proceedings. You don't really have any status. DHS and USCIS are not willing to be graceful. I mean, there's that new memo out that I'm sure has to be litigated through the courts about whether you can wait in the US for your green card or if you have to leave. These are all things that are, one, maybe not even legal because it's not even quite sure that they can do that just through a memo rather than through a whole change in the Immigration Nationality Act. And so, you are in a situation where rules are irrelevant for the people in power. And again, not a statement in court in New Jersey. Anna, maybe remind me of the number. I think it was like over 50 times that they literally said, like, yes, we have violated court orders. And so what you can do, best thing, most practical, actionable item, plug into an immigrant rights org in your area, especially if you're a TPS recipient, if you're a DACA recipient, if you are a deferred action recipient, whatever you may be, plug into the organizations that are doing that advocacy. Because as many of these things go into the courts, this is actually one of the ways in which people can really help, right? By taking that step to take their case to court, to really litigate it, makes it so that precedent can be set. And that we can also start creating good laws out of a mess. So I know that's not really an answer, but that's unfortunately the level of instability that people are living with. You wake up and you see whether it's your day or not to panic.
Thank you, Itzel. Yes, and that leads to also with organizations that are local who are doing the advocacy work or the policy work. They also have lawyers who are trusted in the community and in the movement space, which brings on to, having legal representation. Many people come to our organization and say, I've paid thousands of dollars and they didn't do anything for me. But we have no idea who these lawyers are, right? They can be scams. They can be lawyers without experience or without the consciousness and the values of human rights and immigration rights. So that is very important as well. Thank you, Itzel. Oscar, would you like to mention
Yes, I
something?
just wanted to add to what you're saying because, look, whether it is in New Jersey or Illinois or California, I can tell you with absolute certainty, this is not a problem that we are going to solve by finding well-intending lawyers. There aren't enough lawyers in the country to actually solve this problem. Ultimately, this is really a political and a policy, issue. There are people in the White House now, in the federal government, who are completely bound to implement an agenda that has nothing to do with facts. I mean, it has nothing to do with what's good for the country. It has all to do with what they think the country should be. And from their point of view, people like most of us in this call, at least presenting, are undesirable. They see us as garbage. I mean, the president has said it very eloquently in even worse terms in terms of how he views us. So ultimately, we need to understand that coming to this point didn't happen overnight. Coming to this point by people who hate immigrants has taken several decades of hard work. I'm not saying that it's going to take 40 years for us to reverse where we are today. I believe we can do this much sooner, but we must understand that ultimately it's about getting not only immigrants organized, but immigrants also organizing in coalitions with many allies who understand that this is far beyond the question of immigrants. This is about the future of the United States of America. whether we will have a real meaningful democracy that solves problems for everybody, including immigrants, or a nation that will look more and more like nations we have criticized in the past, namely dictatorships. And I think that that is the dilemma we are in front of, and immigrants are trying to put our best contribution to make indeed the path forward one that is more harmonious. And that's what I meant earlier when I say, we need to counter hate with love, and we need to counter knowledge and get to know each other with fear, because that's the only way we can do it. But that's an organizing strategy. It's not purely a policy or a political strategy.
Thank you. Go ahead, Guerline.
Yeah, I wanted to add and kind of piggyback off of what Oscar was saying. I think it is a policy thing. We don't have enough attorneys. We don't have enough funds to help this issue, but we have to unify. Okay. What the government likes to do is put us in different categories, which is frustrating. I don't care if you're undocumented or you've arrived here documented or you've been here for 10 decades as a diaspora, you're an immigrant here, you're working. We have to all immigrants from all different countries. We need to make it loud. We need to unify, and we need to show the United States of America that you need immigrants, okay? You need us. And I think that's the picture that they're not seeing every day. They're seeing this false narrative that immigrants are criminals, that they can hurt our community. But the reality is when you start to, it becomes a pressure cooker, when you start to instill so much fear in these families, and now you're cutting off their benefits, and you do all what do you think crime is gonna just disappear? Wouldn't crime increase? The nature of man is survival. Any person will do by any means necessary what they need to do for their family to survive. So by ripping and separating and dividing is not the solution, and we have to let that be known. And I know we're at the same time as advocates, we're protecting our families, but we have to somehow empower them to speak up. We need to empower them to come out, and let people know I'm here, I've been here, I'm working, I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse, I'm a lawyer. Immigrants have so many different faces, and they put us in this one category, and I think America needs to see us in different categories, different faces, like we are human like everybody else.
Yeah.
We're brown skin, we're dark skin, we have different languages, but we're human at the end of the day, so and that can only be done if we come out and we show and we speak up about that. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much. And actually, this goes right into one of the questions in the chat that talked about. It was Mari Carmen who's asking from the New Jersey Hispano media, asking, how do we finally use the term undocumented in stories that the press is writing or that we're seeing, instead of those illegal immigrants? And has this national campaign regarding this issue been launched by organizations or advocates for immigrants? Anybody want to take that?
Mommy.
I think I provided a bit of a written response, if I'm not mistaken, to that question. I mean, I definitely recognize that many Spanish language media outlets have actually become better, in terms of not using hate language, that, of course, our opponents of immigrants love, for people to use, such as illegals. But sadly, and I have seen very clearly how this shifted even before the Biden administration came to an end. Networks like National Public Radio, the Washington Post, the New York Times, et cetera, have gone back, to use terminology in their way they report that is hate-driven, such as refer to people without the status as illegals. It's important for people to understand the word illegal has a place. Actions and objects can be illegal. Human beings can never be illegal. As I said before in my earlier comments, we don't even call illegals people who commit rape, people who commit murder, and the term illegal is absolutely a creation by those who hate diversity, who hate people like me, like most of us here. And it is important for us to counter it. And I really believe that the only way forward is hold people accountable, call outlets such as the New York Times out, for using language that is divisive, is hateful, and that's the only way. That I believe we can move forward.
100%. And just to build up on what Oscar says, that's because this is the difference between actually having a stand and then going with the flow, right? If you have a stand on the fact that a human being is not somebody or something that can be illegal, and you change your wording, you should have kept that wording. There's no reason for us to go back. And I think one of the things that we have to do in this moment is really sit and take a toll, a little bit of head count around the room and see who's stepping up in this moment. And I say that because actions speak louder than words. Immigration has been a bipartisan failure for 30 years. We did not get here, as people were saying, overnight. It has been decades under both Republican and Democrat administrations where the detention cell has expanded, the funding has increased. Lincoln Riley, which fundamentally changed the way that people are being able to be held now indefinitely, regardless of age in a lot of states, is a bipartisan product of fear. And so what they are selling is a concept, right? This concept of whoever this illegal human being concept is. But what we know is that that's the importance of humanizing the issue and understanding that that's someone's father, that's someone's mother, that's someone's kid. And for the folks that are deep in faith, children, immigrants are children of God. We are all children of God. And that's why we have to go back and really sit with ourselves. And to Guerline's point about the comments that people make on Facebook, those are real people, folks, who feel hate in their heart. And, we really got to start talking about what we do is who we are. It's not simply what we say we believe, that we believe we're a welcoming person. Let's act welcoming. Let's be our values, and let's be better collectively, because what we are seeing is what happens when we are unwilling to hold the line for each other's humanity and just for the most basic level of respect, right? The opposite of woke language is dehumanizing language. Nobody likes hearing dehumanized language. In theory, it may have sound funny to say that it was, an immigrant's fault for everything that was wrong with our country. In reality, we're all paying $6 at the pump and no one's better off. And that's why we got to be smarter than the stories and the lies and the narratives that they tell us, because the only people that have gotten screwed is working class, middle class people from all around the country, no matter their color, age, and religion, because all of these people are getting SNAP rejection letters, they're getting Medicaid cuts, they're getting their college tuition much more expensive to pay for, and we're all making less money. Well, some people are making record profits, including for-profit detention centers, right? So we got to get smarter about the game that we're playing, and we have to have each other's back, because we are much more closer to being in the same working class than we ever will be to be a millionaire or billionaire sitting up there looking pretty. So solidarity always helps.
Thank you, Itzel. And we're running out of time, although this is such a juicy discussion. I know Raymond Tyler also had a question about what can my readers do to help as they reporting, what ICE is doing, all the bad stuff that is happening, but how can we bring in the love? What would you say? Any last comments before we close?
I left my petitions in the chat. Let Governor Sherrill know to invest in DDI so folks can access to it. Let her know that she stop the expansion of Roxbury. And then the last thing I'll put in the chat while people close out is something called Love is Action, which is an AFSC uh, option that we're putting out where people are able to just go and silent worship, or they can say something out loud, whatever they want, but to stand and witness. What can your readers do? What can every American and every person do in this moment? Be brave enough to witness what is happening in our country rather than look away. So I'll put that chat and hopefully people can link up and learn more about what's happening in the state.
Go ahead, Guerline. Yeah.
I would just add, and this is just the foundation of it all, is we have to go out and vote. Okay. This is super, super. If you can't vote, vote. No one, if you have the right to vote, no one should be sitting. This is the most simplified way you can advocate. Okay. And if you have social media, you have great followings, don't be afraid to correct folks through love. We're not saying to fight and be aggressive and, go back and forth, but show people who you are, show them that, we are God's children, and we do have rights. The Constitution is black and white, is right there. And they're doing everything against the Constitution. This is not America, and we have to kind of use those sound bits constantly, informing folks, because there are folks who are just kind of like in a twilight zone, and they're listening to the wrong narratives, listening to these false propaganda, and at the end of the day, it's going to hurt us all.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Oscar, would you like to say anything to close?
I mean, I want to go back to a very broad, perhaps too ambitious idea. I mean, from the beginning, the United States of America was always conceived to be an experiment constantly on the building, constantly on the improvement side of it. And I think that that's exactly what we are in front of. I mean, the big question is, what are we prepared to do to really make the United States of America a better place, a place that is able to provide dignified lives for everybody, including immigrants who have contributed so much, to this nation. And the people who are driving the campaign against immigrants and who seek to divide us, what they are really about is to make us want to dream of a golden age that never really existed. And I think it is important for us to be very mindful of that, because there are many complaints that people have, and I'm the first to admit there are tons of complaints that people have that aren't being resolved. The problem is immigrant didn't cause any of them. I mean, it is other people who need to be brought out and need to be held accountable, beginning, frankly, with the multimillionaires, the billionaires, the trillionaires that are actually taking advantage, what this country should be offering to everybody, and not asking us to just expect for breadcrumbs. Nobody, including immigrants.
Yes, correct. And with that, I think we're going to close. I want to thank everybody. I'll bring it back to Cassandra. Right now, there's a lot for you to do. And for our country, as you heard all the panelists say, just want to leave with something that's very, very important. We cannot do this without each other. So even though there's parties and there's people that might not be, a conversation goes a long way. Article goes a long way. A news video goes a long way. And we want to keep on encouraging that so that we can build on this together. Thank you so much. I was very honored to moderate this panel. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you to all of you viewers. I'll bring it back to Cassandra.
Okay, everybody. I'll just echo the thanks and appreciation for taking time out of your day for this panel. Special thanks to all of our panelists, Ana for hosting, Guerline, Itzel, Oscar. We so appreciate you. And that's thanks on behalf of everybody here at the Center for Cooperative Media. And we will be in touch with materials and the recording from today's session.